Hey everybody, Gromos here, and I got another short Warthunder video. I hope you all had a nice Christmas. I certainly did, though I did not have much time to get new footage. So what I want to do for this video is to explain a few air combat terms I often use a little bit closer and what they mean for your aircraft. Specifically, I want to talk about wing loading, power to weight ratio, and most importantly, energy retention, with, as always, some hopefully entertaining gameplay footage in the background. I assume some of you already know all this, but if you don't, I hope this video helps you to judge the capabilities of an aircraft by looking at some of its stats and have an idea how to best use it. I won't go into too much detail. Sure, if you look into this seriously, it can get very complicated with complex mathematic formulas and so on, but Warthunder is just a game, not reality, so I see no real reason to make it this complicated. As a game, Warthunder does not mimic reality well enough to make it worth it, I think. I try to focus on what is important for a realistic battle gameplay in Warthunder. Now, another thing I want to mention first. Of course, some planes in Warthunder still have an unfinished flight model or a placeholder, so you have to be careful about that. Well then, let's take a quick look at wing loading and power to weight ratio, because we need those terms for the energy retention part, before we move on to the energy retention and take a look how this all comes together. Now, wing loading is of course an important stat. It is basically the ratio from wing area to aircraft weight, and tells you how much weight every square meter or square inch, whatever system you prefer, of the wing has to carry. The wing of your aircraft creates more lift the faster you go, the faster the airflow is over the wing. This means a plane with a smaller wing at the same weight will have to fly faster in order to create the same amount of lift. The plane with a larger wing will create more lift at all speeds. That of course has an effect on the plane's maneuverability. The plane with a lower wing loading can turn tighter and it stays maneuverable at lower speeds. A plane with a higher wing loading would not be able to maneuver at such low speeds because the wings are not large enough to carry the plane's weight at this low speed. On the other hand, very slow planes often need a much lower wing loading, or in other words, a larger wing in comparison to their weight, because they don't have the speed to fly with a smaller wing. Fast planes of the same weight can make do with a smaller wing, which at enough speed creates enough lift to make them fly. Of course, the larger the wing, the larger the drag or air resistance, but it is something we take a look at when we talk about energy retention. Now, getting the wing loading is pretty straightforward. You just divide the aircraft's loaded weight by its wing area. Both stats are usually easy to find on the internet. The things you have to be careful about is that you use the loaded weight, not the empty or maximum takeoff weight, and that you have the data for the correct version of the plane, as this can make a large difference. Take the Wildcat for example. The F4F-4 is heavier than the F4F-3, and therefore the wing loading is different. Now on to power to weight ratio, or power loading as it is also called. This is simple enough. It describes the ratio from engine power to aircraft weight. So engine power divided by the loaded weight, and in general it can be said the higher the better. A better power loading will mean that you can accelerate better, climb better, and it helps you keep your energy up or regain it relatively fast without having to dive. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind when looking at multi-engined planes is that one engine with a certain horsepower is more efficient than two engines with the same combined horsepower driving two air screws. So the power loading might not be as high as it sometimes looks on a multi-engined plane. Now, with those two basic terms out of the way, let's take a look at energy retention and how the aircraft's characteristics and traits influence your energy retention. To start off with the most well-known factor, weight. A heavier plane is usually a good boom and zoom fighter, because it will build up a good amount of speed when diving. The aerodynamic drag tries to slow you down, while gravity and your engine power accelerate you toward the ground. The drag will of course increase with your speed, and it does so exponentially. With a lighter object, the point where the drag is an equal force to the gravity pulling your plane down and your engine power is reached sooner, and once they are the same, you can't accelerate any further. That's one reason why heavy fighters usually can reach higher speeds in a dive, and it will have a good energy retention in a zoom climb, meaning it will keep its speed up well in it. Now, why is that? Why is a heavier fighter zoom climbing better? Well, that has to do with inertia. As Newton's first law states, an object in motion will not change its velocity unless an external force acts upon it. Of course, we do not fly in space, we have such forces that will slow our plane down, gravity and aerodynamic drag. But a heavier object at a certain speed has more kinetic energy than a lighter object at the same speed. It also took more energy to get the heavier object up to that speed. But now it will also take more energy, more force, to reduce the speed of the heavier object. So the forces that want to slow you down, like drag, have to, so to speak, put more work into it to slow down a heavier plane than a lighter one, as long as it flies in a straight line. You can imagine it like that. Assume you have a car and a freight train on top of a large hill, and you just let them roll down into the valley and then back up another hill on the other side. I think you can imagine what happens. The freight train will take just a little longer to get going, but once it is, it will reach a higher speed on the way down and soon overtake the car, and on the way back up on the other side, the car will stop very soon because it is lighter. The train will just keep going up for a while because it is hard to stop once it reached a certain high speed. So that is why heavier planes have a good energy retention in a zoom climb, but for similar reasons, inertia, they have a very bad energy retention in turns. That's where a light plane has the upper hand. More energy is required to make a heavy plane change its direction than a light one, so in turn fights a light plane will keep its energy up better. Now, weight is of course not the only important thing here. As mentioned already, aerodynamic drag also plays an important role. Let's take a dive followed by a zoom climb as an example again. In both cases the drag or air resistance will work against you. In the dive it will limit your acceleration and top speed, and in the zoom climb it will slow you down faster. So the less drag your plane creates, the more energy you can build up in the dive, and you can hold on to it easier in the zoom climb. Now keep in mind your entire plane creates drag, not just the front part of it. So how large your plane is, how large your wings and so on are, all that will matter for the drag. That is one reason, in case you have wondered, why heavy twin-engine bombers are not necessarily the best divers, despite the fact that they are heavier than single-engine fighters. They also are a lot larger and create a lot more drag. So a lighter plane with a good aerodynamic layout that creates less drag, a design with small wings for example, can still be a decent diver and zoom climber, though don't expect this to make up the difference to a true boom and zoom plane completely. Now, the larger wings on a turn fighter enable it to turn well of course, but they also create some extra drag, which has a negative impact on the plane's top speed and energy retention in general. That's why many more modern fighter designs have a comparably high wing loading, as a better turning design would mean larger wings, and that means more air resistance. Now, another factor for energy retention I have already mentioned is engine power. We have already talked about power to weight ratio. The better it is, the better the plane can keep its energy up. Now, with that basic information, I want to give you an example on how to get an impression of what a plane might be able to do in Warthunder before you have flown it. Again, keep in mind that not all the flight models are finished though. Well, let's take a look at the X3. I am currently working on unlocking it, but I don't own it yet, so I have not flown it. Let's take a look at some data and see what it might tell us. First thing I like to take a look at are always weight and wing loading. The X3 has an average loaded weight of about 2650 kg or 5860 pound. Now that's pretty lightweight for a plane developed this late in the war. Early in the war some fighters were lighter, but for a 1944 plane this is very light. The plane will not be a great boom and zoomer, but otherwise the lower weight is a very good thing. Now there's a reason for the low weight. The plane is quite small and also has a very small wing area. As a matter of fact, it has one of the smallest wings of any fighter of the war. So despite its low weight, the wing loading is not that low. at average 180 kg per square meter or 37 pound per square foot. That is about average for a plane of the era. Not a turn fighter, but not bad either. To compare the 180 kg per square meter with other planes, a turner like the Spitfire Mark 9 is a lot lower with 150 kg per square meter. The B-63 King Cobra is a little lower with 174, and the LA-5FN is a little bit higher with average 186 kg per square meter. The B-51Ds and late 109Gs will have a higher wing loading. So, while the Yak 3 can turn fight a lot of opponents, it is not a pure turn fighter by any means. The wing loading is too high for that. However, what the low weight and the low drag from the small plane with its small wings suggest is that the plane has a very good energy retention in turns. This impression is reinforced by the power-to-weight ratio. The plane has the same engine than a Yak 9, but it is a lot lighter, giving the plane a very good power-to-weight ratio. That helps with acceleration and of course energy retention. So the plane should be an exceptional energy fighter. Well, I will have the plane unlocked soon enough and then I can see if I was right. So that was an example of how to use the plane's data to hopefully get an impression on what it may be capable of and how to use it or fly against it. I hope that provides some insights on how to judge a plane. And this is it for this video. I hope it was informative, thanks for watching and maybe I'll see you next time.